Hey everyone, it's Josh Andrew here. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Conversations with Josh Andrew. We're all about leadership, having meaningful conversations, and getting just a little bit better every day. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. Your support helps us reach more people and continue bringing your great content. Thanks for listening, and let's keep the conversation going. Let's get into this week's episode. Well, hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of Conversations. I'm really excited to jump into this week's topic about leading creatives, and really this idea of understanding how to lead and scale in which that you're leading right now. So again, this context could be applied to church, this could be applied to business, this could really be applied to anything in the capacity of understanding that there are people. I truly believe everyone is designed as a creative, but there are people that we understand have very specific creative abilities and creative mindsets and ideologies. So this is just going to be some general thoughts that as a creative, as somebody who I believe is designed as a creative, but also understanding that I'm a leader, I'm very structured, I'm very forward thinking. I'm really not a typical creative the way that you would probably assume a creative is designed. But again, jumping into this concept of leading a creative, man, there are people in our organizations and our churches who sure might be shooting photos or videos or doing some graphic design, but the concept of creativity is so much more than that. Really, if you think about the book of Genesis, which is the first book of the Bible, really the design anyways is that we are created in God's image. And you would read all throughout Genesis, in the beginning, God created. I think those are the first words of the Bible. When you think about this, we're created in a creative's image, which means we are actually designed to be creative. That does not mean you automatically are effective. That does not mean you're automatically gifted. What that means is us as leaders need to pull that out of people. So really over the next 30 minutes, I'm going to really hit some general schemes or general thoughts around this concept. And then what we'll do is hopefully anyways, get a little bit better. Again, this whole concept, this whole podcast really is designed to make you better, to make me better, for us to be able to have conversations around the subject of leadership, subject of ministry, and today, obviously talking about creativity and leading creatives. Also being a creative, man. Just because you're creative, that does not give you excuses to not be structured. That doesn't give you excuses to not hit deadlines and all of that, which we'll talk through. But really, here's some thoughts that I believe are going to help you lead creatives, be a creative, and again, getting a little bit better. So as a leader, you don't want to sacrifice your team's creativity on the slaughter slab of consistency. Something that is always the tension point between people who are really operational minded and creativity, where these two collide is when the leader is trying to bridge consistency. In my context in the local church, there are every single Sunday we have services, we have people shooting content, recording videos, doing slides and services, doing graphics, all of this type of stuff that you would sense to be a little bit more on the creative edge. What ends up happening though is if we don't set the right boundaries or the right parameters around this, doing something just to do it or just to be consistent is never the byproduct of a healthy mindset. The healthy mindset, again, is always giving them parameters and pushing, obviously, towards consistency. Consistency is healthy. If you want to be taken serious as a leader, you should be a person of consistency. But the reality is we don't want to sacrifice our teams. We don't want to sacrifice our leaders, our creatives, for just the sake of consistency. Just because you always have to have a why behind what you're saying, by the way. So if it's just, hey, we want to be consistent. Well, why do you want to be consistent? Consistency matters because blank. Just because, hey, this is what we do, we need to be consistent, you need to do this, you're going to burn out creatives. And again, you're going to sacrifice really the best product, the best outcome in your team as a creative. Really, as a creative anyways, your responsibility is not outcomes. Outcomes is really where there's a lot of tension points with leaders, with a lot of operational minds and creatives, because creatives really need to be thinking about inputs. Inputs and attitudes are really the two things that we can control. and the outcome is always up to God, and understanding that it's never about the outcome. With creatives, anyways, it's about the process and it's about the inputs. It's about the art, the practice of doing something. So, again, you don't want to sacrifice your team's creativity on the slaughter slab of consistency. Another thought here is a company in which anyone is afraid to speak up to be original is closing the coffin door on itself. You can apply this to your context. A team that, if everyone is afraid to speak up or to be original, you're closing the coffin door on your team. What that means is, as a creative, as a leader, we can never be married to methods. If you want to be married to methods, you're not going to have a level of significance that I'm assuming that you want. Even if you're listening to this podcast or watching this YouTube video, man, you want to make a difference. You want to make an impact. You want your team to make a difference and an impact. We got to be willing to be original, and we got to give people under us permission to be original. Sure, send them ideas. Sure, send them parameters, or sure, send them recommendations. But giving them freedom to be original, freedom to think, is going to be the level that you're going to actually rise up leaders. The whole goal here, by the way, is to build leaders, not just have people do things or just get a job done. It's never about getting a job done. So again, we got to give people anyways permission to speak up, to be original, to be themselves. God truly did design them for a specific way. And again, anytime you're having a conversation with creative, you can truly see that God has shaped them in a different way. One of my best friends is an incredible graphic designer. He does cover arts for musicians and artists. Since I've known him in 6th grade, he's always been so much better at what he does than everybody else. That doesn't mean that he should have an ego or he should have pride. What that means is when refined and when we give him parameters around the concept of this, what ends up happening is the outcome is pretty much better than everybody else's. I don't know how to say that in a different way anyways, but you got to think about this. People who are gifted know that they're gifted, or either have been told that they shouldn't be confident in their gifting. What that does is it mutes a creative. It mutes a leader. I don't want to mute a leader. I don't want to mute a creative. I want them to voice their opinion. I want them to, because they're thinking in their minds, they're seeing things that you're not seeing. And we got to give them permission to speak up. We got to give them permission to be themselves. We got to give them permission to be right or wrong. It's not about being right or wrong. It's about them sharing. And we got to do a great job. Me as a leader, I got to do a great job of making sure they feel seen and valued, and that even if it's a bad idea, the art of sharing is appreciated in this team. So really, here's the bottom line. Here's the thesis of this whole episode. The two things creative teams want, the two things, I guess, that they don't even want, that they need, is challenge and stability. If you want to lead a creative, if you want to lead a creative organization, if you want to start a marketing agency, if you want to have designers on your team, the two things that they need, that really it's your responsibility as a leader, is to give them challenge and is to give them stability. Most creatives you know, and most creatives I know, typically challenge themselves in ways to get better at their craft. What they don't typically do is challenge themselves to become better with their systems, to become better with their character or their private life, and even their stability. Most creatives you know, it's like craziness. They got 500 projects going on. They have no systems around it. Their head's going 100 miles an hour with their hands going 20 miles an hour. So they're just always burnt out. They're always in a state of really unrest. Me as a leader, my responsibility is to offer them challenge and is to offer them stability. What this means is my job is not to solve their problems. My job is not to give them critique or feedback on what they're creating. Although sometimes there is obviously room for that. But if we give them enough challenge, not challenging their craft, that's where we miss it. And again, most of the time, the creatives in your organization are better than you at the thing they're doing. Because if they weren't better than you, you would be doing it. So the graphic designer on your team is probably better at graphic design than you, or they're probably better at video editing than you. I love that so much. And as a secure leader, I'm going to go, great. I'm not here to help critique you on video editing. I'm here to build your character and to challenge that, to challenge your integrity, to challenge your belief systems, to challenge your ideology around creativity and around the church, or to provide you stability in your life, because most creatives don't even have a calendar. They don't have a process in which they do something. So those are the two things we need to challenge. So jumping into really these bigger subjects here. When you do the work, the capacity of your team never sails beyond you. What this means is, again, my job as a leader is not to get the job done. My job as a leader is to build the people who are continuing to execute their specific role. So you might be leading video editors. Okay, let's just go to the video department in your organization. Okay, your job is not to edit videos. Your job isn't even to give them feedback on the videos. Your job is to continue to push their capacity and to help them explain with their mouths what they're seeing in their minds. Most creatives, that's where the gap ends up happening, and that's where you get frustrated as a leader, is they're not doing a good job of articulating what's in their minds. You got to do a really, really good job of discovery when you're leading creatives to get in their minds, to give them margin to think. Most creatives have so many tasks that are required of them, you're not giving them margin to think. So again, we got to stop doing all the work. We got to stop getting everything done just to get it done. Understand that the things that we're doing sure should have timelines, sure need to continue to be worked on and execute at a healthy rhythm and pace. But all of that is a byproduct of you giving them permission to have margin, you giving them permission to be how God has designed them to be, which is they're gifted. When we want, that is worship. That is them giving their best, is when they have margin. And again, when you're not the busy bee, you're not a project manager as a leader. I'm just telling you that. You should have project managers. There should be conversations or communication around executing and getting things through the finish line. Absolutely. But again, all of that at a healthy pace anyways is down to rhythm and margin. And again, when you do the work, the capacity of your team is just based on you. It'll never go beyond you. So you thinking that, man, I'm actually helping my team by just getting this done really quick. What you're doing is you're setting the capacity bar to yourself. And one person can't do much. The math of collaboration is multiplication. Math of collaboration. You want to collaborate. You want to be a healthy team. You want to do things that are incredible and have the best content or the best concepts around what you're doing, sermon series, all of the above. And it's so much more than just art. It's obviously sermon writing. It's leading worship. It's kids ministry, curriculum, all that type of stuff. You got to think about in the lens of, man, if I do it, I'm the lid. If they do it and we do it, now there's 10 people learning that they have responsibilities, and then they all have proper delegation to have margin so they can think. And again, the best creatives are the ones who understand how to get what's in their mind out of their mouth so that other people can understand not just how they do it, but why they do it and the process in which we are creative. So creative people need leaders that direct their energy towards the right cause. Again, you're not a project manager. This isn't about executing and getting designs in. This is about building people. This is about encouraging people, because this will apply to their whole life. There's no such thing as I'm super structured in this area and not in this area. You either are a person of structure, you're a person of stability, or you're not. So me as a leader, my job is to help them direct their energy. Your energy is going places with you or without you, with you telling it where it's going or where it's not. It will always, because again, if you wake up, you're doing something. Every single moment from when you wake up to when you go to bed, there's something that you're doing, whether you know it or not. Not doing something is doing something. As creatives, what ends up happening as we get so overwhelmed with the idea of something that we end up not actually executing it because we're not putting our energy towards it, or we're putting energy towards the wrong things. And again, we should never be putting our energy towards outcomes. What if I just put my energy towards inputs? Again, this might look like, if you're a writer, If I'm writing, what's going to end up happening is if I write every single day and I'm not thinking about finishing a book, the idea of I need you to finish a 50,000 word book, that's a little overwhelming. Instead of, hey, I need you to write 15 minutes a day, what ends up happening is in 3 months, you're going to have a book. Same thing with sermon prep or writing messages. I need you to come up with a 45-minute message and memorize it. It's like, well, that's kind of intense. Hey, I need you to read your Bible every single day because you should as a Christian. Journal about it and what do you believe God's speaking to you. By Friday, promise you're going to have a lot of thoughts. You're going to have a lot of things to process as a believer of Jesus. This applies to anything. Again, my job is to help you disseminate your energy towards the right things and help challenge you on putting the energy towards the wrong things. So a leader takes people where they want to go, but a great leader takes people where they don't want to go, but they ought to be. So you got to be a good leader, just tell people where to go, what to do, how to execute, how to get things done. A great leader takes people where they don't want to go, but where they ought to be. You as a leader, you got to understand your responsibility is taking people on the lifelong journey of leadership and growth. You're either growing or you're dying. There's no such thing as plateauing in leadership. You're going one way or you're going the other way. You're either going up or you're going down. There's no plateauing in leadership. As a leader, I got to know that applies to the people that I'm responsible for. So they're either growing or they're dying. Not physically, obviously, but more in their minds and their growth mindset towards their leadership. So if I want to be a great leader, I got to actually look for the gaps in the people that I'm leading and help them over time acquire what that gap is. You've heard it tons of times, stretch, grow, strength. I always like to say stretch, grow, rest, strength, because I believe that's actually the pace, no matter if they're creative or not. Stretch, that's going to be an opportunity. That's going to be a challenge. That's going to be something that might not be actually in their capacity, but you're encouraging them and you're being consistent with them in that. Stretch, grow, that's where growth happens. Growth happens, and most of the time, growth, by the way, isn't fun. Like, anytime I went to the gym and lifted a higher weight than I did one week than the other week, it's typically not the most fun thing in the world, but what I realized after 6 months of doing that, a 25-pound dumbbell used to feel heavy, now it feels light. Just as much in leadership, what ends up happening is stretching, growing, resting, and then strengthening. So that's the pace of a creative, that's the pace of leading anybody. You got to stretch them, you got to grow them, you got to offer rest, and then through looking back, you'll go, oh my gosh, I've grown so much. That's who we are as leaders. We got to take people where they might not want to go, but once they're there, they're going to thank you for it. The best leaders that I've had in my life are people that challenged me. And although it might have had an initial pain point, or there might have been an initial offense, after years of reflection, I go, thank you so much for taking me where I didn't know I needed to go. So a leader takes people where they want to go. A great leader takes people where they don't want to go, but they ought to be. Last couple thoughts here. One way to lose trust in your team is dissemination of information prematurely. This is huge for creatives because as projects become important to us, as things come up, maybe there's a guest speaker coming to your church last minute, all that type of stuff is super important. And we got to understand that offering information as soon as we get the full picture is the best case scenario. We understand there are times where that's not a reality. But what I've just learned over time is as you give the 25% tainted picture of something, they're going to assume that's the full picture and either execute and make something that wasn't proper or communicate to their teams wrong information. So then you have to end up redoing something or re-clarifying something because clarity is always more important than speed. Again, the speed happens when we have the full picture and we can all understand we're doing our part. Me as a leader, I'm doing my part when I'm offering you the full picture, not 25% of the picture, not as it comes. And that just comes down to proper communication with the actual leadership team, with the executive team, with the staff, or however that looks. You got to get the full picture, and you got to get really, really good at asking questions that you would know that your team member is going to ask you. So I'm just going to make sure I have the right information for them so I can offer it the full picture So as a creative, I have the full picture and I can execute. Again, I've said it multiple times in this episode, but execution's not the goal. Execution is a byproduct of us being healthy and having the right priorities in picture, and very much so the right information. You have the right information, you have the right team in the right places, and you have the right mindset, you can do anything. Something that might look big to unorganized people that are not stable, when you're organized and stable and you're willing to embrace the challenge, all of that stuff actually ends up going, this is easy. This is nothing. We can do this in 2 hours. Because why? We have the right spirit, we have the right attitude, and we have stability. You have those 3 things, you're going to have a healthy creative team. Last 2 thoughts here on leading creatives. Be specific on what they shouldn't focus on. Stop being so specific on what they should focus on. Stop being specific on what they should execute on as creatives. They are creatives. They are gifted in ways that you are not, and you trying to give them information or vision on something that they already might have is hindering their ability to create in which God has designed them to be. If you're going to lead creatives, you got to understand that God has wired them in such a way that they can do something that you cannot. And that has to have a level of security as a leader that goes, you're better at this than I am, which that means I just need to give you permission to be who God's designed you to be, and which so I need to continue to tell you what you shouldn't focus on. I've heard it said over and over throughout this whole pod, stop focusing on blank. To me, stop focusing on outcomes. We're not worried about outcomes here, but we're worried about inputs and attitudes. If I have the right spirit and attitude, and I understand a daily input towards what I'm creating is going to make me the best version of the creative God has designed me to be, and it might actually look super specific. Maybe there's a huge project that's going on and then something very, very small that just needs to be done and finished. A quick phone call or a quick one-on-one is going to go, hey, over the next 20 hours of your work week, I need you to focus on these 3 things. Or, hey, don't focus on that. Hey, man, you create, you do the thing that you believe is going to give you the most margin to think and the most margin to visualize what you believe is most important in this moment. Giving them permission to just think and execute and be themselves, you're going to be way better off leading creatives because very much so, like I tend to be always in the operations side of organizations, which is funny because I am a creative and I've just always been in this space. I've always been, even when I ran a business for 5 years and had 19 employees, I was running a business. I wasn't really the one executing on the creative projects. What always ends up happening is creatives and the people who are more operational minded hit collab and they hit heads because one side is focused on execution, one side is focused on the process. Both of these things are important and both of these things can coexist, but you need to understand creatives think a certain way. People who are more structured and operationally minded think in a different way. Both of those things can blend if you give both of them permission to not fully understand each other all the time. The goal here is not for everyone just to be understood. The goal is health. Everything we do in leadership is about health. Everything we do in leadership is not about outcomes. Everything we do in leadership is not about just getting the thing done. That's where managers come in and that's where bosses come in. I'm not your boss. I'm not your manager. I'm your pastor. I'm your friend. I'm your leader. When I think about that, I think about, man, what is the pace of grace that's set on our team? Okay. And maybe a lot of people are tired. Maybe there's, again, look at the outcomes. That is your job as leader. Look at the outcomes and then reverse engineer and go back to the inputs and attitudes. The outcome wasn't what you wanted. Okay. So the inputs, we didn't really have great systems. We didn't have a great meeting rhythm. We didn't have enough time to just be together and have fun together. Or maybe it was our attitudes. We all had bad spirits. We just kind of did it to get it done. And then now we have a bad product. We have a bad execution of the thing we're trying to create. Again, this goes back to you as a leader. You got to understand what's best for your team and what's best for the future of the individual. I always think in teams, And then individuals, because you don't have a team without individuals. Every single person's different. Every single person has different gaps and blind spots. So for you, what ends up happening is you try to lead everybody the same way, because it's similar to a marriage. You always initially, their love language, you always love them through your love language because you think that's the way that should be reciprocated. So maybe you're a physical touch person and your spouse is a gifts person. You're hugging them all the time. It's like, stop touching me. Just buy me something, or just give me words of affirmation. What you're doing is you're trying to love them the way you want to be loved. Similar to leadership, you're leading people the way you want to be led. That does not mean that's how they should be led. You cannot lead somebody else and think about yourself at the same time. It's impossible. It doesn't matter if they're creative or not. You cannot lead somebody and serve somebody and think about yourself at the same time. What ends up happening when those two things collide, that's where manipulation happens. When you're trying to lead somebody and you're thinking about yourself before them. So you're helping them execute, you're helping them get responsibilities done in the wrong inputs and the wrong attitudes, and you're thinking about yourself and how it's going to make you grow, make you more money, make your organization look better. When those things collaborate, that's what happens. It's manipulation. Manipulation or coercion is when I'm thinking about myself more than you, and I'm thinking about my outcomes more than your inputs and your attitude. So again, be specific on what they shouldn't focus on. Stop being specific on what they should focus on. Give them parameters. We say this 1,000 times. I say this anyways. Freedom within a framework. Hey, here's the framework of our organization. Here's our 6-month timeline, and here's the in which that is important to me. Okay? Those are the things that we shouldn't focus on. We know what you shouldn't focus on? Maybe this, maybe this, maybe this. Be specific, and as insanely as specific as you can on things they shouldn't focus on. Gives them permission and margin to think about the things that they should focus on. Last thing here, if you treat your team like a machine, that's what you'll end up getting. You're not leading a machine. Every single person has their own private life struggles. They have relational struggles, financial struggles. Every single person has things going on in their lives, and if we can have a little bit of empathy and a little bit of understanding that their world doesn't revolve around you. And newsflash, their world actually doesn't even revolve around your organization. Yes, if they're working 40 hours a week, there is a big portion of their week or their life that they're putting towards the organization. And it's really not my organization, especially in the church. It's not my church. It's not my organization. It's our organization. It's our church. And it's obviously God's bride. So when you think about that level of, man, if I cannot treat my team like a machine. Treating people like a machine, that's what you're going to end up getting. You're going to get robots. And I can always tell when somebody's a robot. It's because, again, they have the wrong spirit. They have the wrong attitude. Because, again, it's not about execution. It's not about just getting a job done. If we want to just get a job done, by the way, we could just start a business, especially in the church. Like, why don't we just start a business if it's just about making a lot of money or getting a lot of influence? We got to understand that it's doing the right thing with the wrong spirit is doing the wrong thing. Because again, it always goes back to our inputs, our spirit, our pace, and understanding that, again, this is not their world. Their world is their life. This is all of it encompassing. I'm the best leader I can be when I actually care about their world. You got to care about their world. You got to give them permission to talk. That's why I always say, hey, tell me what's going on in your world. Not tell me how you're liking your job. How's church going? How's your fine? Stop being so specific. Being a pastor, by the way, is always going broad question and hearing the thing behind the thing, hearing the spirit behind the answer, and then actually digging another layer deeper. So tell me about your world. Tell me what's going on in your world. The Holy Spirit's going to speak to them and give them specifics. That's always the best altar calls, or not when somebody's being specific. If you're struggling with this, if you're struggling with this, if you're struggling with this, you just listed 4 things or 3 things, and there's 57 other things that you didn't list. Just say, hey, if you're struggling, and allow the Holy Spirit to speak in specifics. Generalizations are usually generally wrong in the negative context, but in the positive context of just saying, hey, if you're struggling with this, blank, 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 Now you just listed 5 things and they're like, well, that wasn't me, so I'm not going to go up. I don't need prayer. No, you do need prayer because there might be something else. There's a dark corner in your life that you're not sharing with somebody. Similar to one-on-ones, similar to leading creatives. Always give them, again, margin to just share. The gift of vulnerability is huge when it comes to leading and pastoring people. And don't assume that they're going to give it to you. Don't assume they're going to share everything with you. You got to be able to understand how people are feeling, the spirit in which they're doing. It usually comes back to, honestly, their response time. That's taken a long time to respond. There's just little indicators along the journey that you're going to figure out in people's when they're unhealthy and when they need a little bit of encouragement. And nobody has ever been too encouraged. No one on your team, no graphic designer on your team has been like, man, you know what? Josh is just encouraging me too much, man. This guy, he just texts me too many nice things. That will never happen in your organization. Be the person that everyone knows he's going to speak into me. He's going to put life in me, and he's going to encourage me. And he's not going to challenge the wrong things, but he's going to encourage the right things. I believe if you do some of these things, take one of these principles and apply it to your team, apply it to maybe the 2 people you're leading today, and I would almost guarantee you creatives will feel more permission to be themselves, permission to execute in the things that you're trying to get them to do. They just won't do it, or they're constantly burnt out. They've got mental problems going through their minds because there's so much going on in their minds. It's because you're not giving them permission to share and permission to sit. One of the best things you can do as a creative that I do multiple times a week is just go sit somewhere. That's not my office. It's not in my normal rhythm. I'm just going to go. I'm going to sit. I'm going to have a cup of coffee, and I'm just going to allow my brain to catch up. Because my hands work so hard. They're doing so much. Now I'm letting my brain catch up to what I'm doing. And that usually is at a healthy pace, healthy rhythm, and giving myself permission to be with Jesus because he's always going to be the person who's going to refresh me, fill my cup, and get me more passionate about building his church. I love you guys so much. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode about how to lead creatives. A couple thoughts that, again, on my journey of over 10 years of leading and in the business world and the church world, these are just a couple things that I've seen that we truly miss sometimes when we think about leading creatives. Again, it's never about the outcome. It's always about the inputs and the attitudes and the spirit in which we create. Because we are made in the image of a creative God. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. Please comment and like and subscribe. Do all of those things. It helps us so much reach more people. We'll see you next week.